Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panel, Dan Levy and member of Knesset, Mirav Michaeli.
Hello, J Street. So,
You would think that they've been sitting here a while, according to the response.
yeah. So, I know you like short plenaries and short panels here. We've been told to talk about setting the table for peace, but I would be amiss if I didn't first just say how great it feels to be here on the 10th anniversary
Yay.
of J Street. Merav has been with us many times. For me, looking back, when we were still thinking what the name would be, drafting the first papers with Jeremy, the first pitches, and J Street's grown from strength to strength, and a decade of amazing leadership by Jeremy Ben-Ami. And if you'd have told me If you'd have told me 10 years ago this is where we'd be, I don't think I'd have imagined it could have been this much of an achievement. But if you'd have told me 10 years ago some other things, that might also have given me a reason to pause, to consider what the future holds. And maybe it's my lack of imagination. But if you'd have told me that Gaza would still be under siege, Gaza and the West Bank divided, the Palestinian leadership, despite what we heard, still bereft of a strategy. If you'd have told me that the cast of characters in the Israeli government would look as it does, that the narrative would so often be one that is offensive and racist, if you'd have told me that a leader of the New Israel Fund would be held for questioning at Ben Gurion Airport for her political views and affiliations, or that another Jewish group, JVP, would be banned from entering Israel, I also couldn't have imagined an American president who calls his former FBI director a slimeball. Or that the priestly duties of the Kohanim would include paying hush money to porn actors. But in setting the table for this conversation, what worries me and where I think the challenge lies is it's gotten worse, but the pendulum hasn't swung back nearly enough. And what I really wouldn't have imagined is that there had been insufficient pushback and blowback and counter-reaction across many fronts. Of course, inside Israel, and Mirav's here, Mirav can speak for herself. I wish we had more Miravs, and I wish we had a more effective opposition, if I may say, including the leader of your own party, but you don't have to respond to that.
I will.
Good. On the Palestinian side, I heard a lot, but I'm not seeing a lot. And what I heard, one of the things I heard that was fascinating is that I heard listed all the villages in Area C where there's non-violent resistance. I heard about Gaza and Jerusalem. That's all the areas where you don't have the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian security forces. That's a real challenge. On the regional side, we've seen a collective shrug, not a collective roar, and an attempt to do normalization without the Palestinians, or even against the Palestinians. The international community has again shown its robust fecklessness. And in America, it's perhaps the source of hope and also, of course, greater frustration, because you see an administration so aligned with the most egregious policies of the current Israeli government. But you also see what J Street has achieved. I was moved by what we heard from Ricky of J Street U and the End the Demolitions campaign. I was a little older than 6 months at that rally in Rubin Square. And the emergence of a group like If Not Now. So let me just share with you, Merav, to get us going, the 3 things that have been on my mind in terms of what one might do in this current situation. Because I do not believe that right now, in this precarious moment, is a time for grand initiatives, actually. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I do not want to do the injustice to the English language of coining the phrase Trump peace plan. I have no expectations from this administration. And where that leads me to focus is 3 things. Number 1, hold the line. Hold the line on 67, on international law, on opposing what's gone on with Jerusalem. Hold the line also of the logical sequence of the Arab Peace Initiative. The future of Israel will be determined by how Israel interacts with the Palestinians, those under direct occupation in the West Bank, indirect occupation in Gaza, in the twilight zone of East Jerusalem, those who are second-class citizens in Israel, and the Palestinian diaspora. It will not be determined by whether flights to and from Israel happen to cross Saudi airspace, or whether there are meetings, official, unofficial, between Israelis and Gulf officials. That's not going to determine our future. So number 1, how do we hold the line? Number 2, for me, this is so much about the incentive and disincentive structure. How do you change, and this is difficult, I know, and it's difficult for an Israeli patriot and for yourself. How do you change the cost-benefit calculation? It's great to have incentives for peace, but what are the disincentives for continuing with the status quo? How do we create accountability? And I wonder how one and when one more effectively revisits the question of sanctioning, and whether we should make common cause with some of the most regressive elements in the community and beyond. We may disagree with fellow progressives on an endgame, or some may, but surely we have more in common. And surely the instrumentalizing of anti-Semitism and the misdefining of anti-Semitism is undermining the struggle against anti-Semitism. Israel should not be held to a lower standard. And Israel should not be used as the vehicle for launching attacks on civil rights and freedom of speech. And I disagree with something I heard earlier. I think there should be a UN database on companies involved in the settlements, and it should be published, and it's the right thing to do. And my third thing is, Gaza is a humanitarian crisis, but it's born of a political situation. We have to address the politics. Gaza can't be a mini-state. Gaza can't be a perpetual prison. Gaza can't be a protectorate of Egypt. Now here, I think there is much common ground inside the Israeli security establishment that thinks people are doing the wrong thing there, and maybe even some possibility for movement within the government. But that has to be linked back into something political. So those are the 3 initial thoughts I wanted to share with you, but I'm going to shut up.
Emphasis initial.
And perhaps final as well. Mirav, I don't know how you see the way out of the impasse that we're clearly in.
Okay. Well, Daniel, who became 10 years older during this time. No, not now, I mean since the first J Street Convention. Seriously, that's what I meant. Doesn't remember that he's responsible to bringing me to the first J Street Convention. Long before I was in politics, or at least in formal politics, I had the privilege of being in Washington in the first J Street Convention. And to remember, if you think that you are excited and energized about what's happening now, you have no idea. Those of you who weren't here 10 years ago, because you were far too young to be allowed to go out of the house alone. And this energy that was then and is here now is part of the ability of this camp that believes in peace and believes in the two-state solution as a way for peace, sustainable, real peace, and as a way for Israel to be sustainable and secure and the homeland of the Jewish people. Mind you, all of the Jewish people, without distinctions. This is a place for us to voice our beliefs and what we're all working for so hard. But in those 10 years, not only did we get a little bit older, but, and the things that Daniel mentioned have happened, but also in these 10 years, we, all of us, are now in a much more, unfortunately, in a much more, I would say, defensive, almost corner. A lot has become much more difficult. The situation in many angles has become much more dire. And it has become more difficult for us to fight for what we believe in. So when I said I will comment on your saying about the opposition in Israel, I do want to make you think about Democrats in America in the last year. Okay? Think, and keep in mind that the opposition in Israel has been living under this kind of regime for 25 years already. Ever since the incitement against Yitzhak Rabin, ever since the incitement against the Oslo Accord that was supposed to bring the two-state solution with peace to Israel and Palestine. And the people who did not want this to happen are still working to make sure that this doesn't happen. And unfortunately, ever since then, most of the time they've been in power. Now, the opposition in Israel, which consists of the Zionist Union, which is labor, and the movement of Tzipi Livni, and labor with Avi Gabay as chair right now, and Meretz, and other partners, have not strayed from Yitzhak Rabin's way of working towards two states and peace and democracy and Israel as the Jewish democratic home of the Jewish people. Not strayed. I want to assure you that because I know how trendy it is to speak about how the opposition is not good enough, not loud enough, not successful enough. Well, sometimes we ourselves, yes, we wish that we had been able to throw away the government that we think is doing Israel wrong. But you know what? no opposition in the world ever managed to throw down a government. It's always the government that brings down itself. And I have news for you. This government will bring itself down as well. Now, keeping the line, what you referred to, Daniel, is not as easy as well. Keeping not on either frontier, because we have a government that works actively and formally. They're not hiding it as they used to in the past. They're working towards annexation. They're working towards killing the mere option of a two-state solution. We are fighting that as best we can. We are voting against whatever legislation proposal that they're bringing. We are filibustering everything, every initiative that they bring. We are shouting as loud as we possibly can, but we are facing the same incitement and delegitimization that Yitzhak Rabin had to deal with. This is the same dynamic. These are the same forces, and they are even more self-confident today. And we have to fight it even stronger than we had to in the past. Your partnership is super important for us to be able to do this. So thank you. Now, I've been listening to you. I'm here for 2 days. I had the pleasure of speaking on some sessions and listening to you. More than, I listened to the speakers, but I listened to you. And I heard you applauding so strong and so enthusiastically when people talk about the victims or the people that you consider to be the victims. But it hurt me actually to hear you not applauding when the last speaker said that he believes in the state of Israel and its right to exist and its right to security and the importance of it. Seriously. It's easy to get confused. I'm saying this because this is something that we have to deal with constantly. But I think it's always attributed to him, your British author, who said, patriotism means to support your country at any time and your government only when it deserves it. But don't mix between the two. I said in my inaugural speech to the Knesset, which took place 5 years ago, Israel is in a strong and secure place, maybe more than ever before. Thankfully, it is in this position. I strongly believe that from this place, Israel must take initiative to find a solution for the conflict with the Palestinians specifically and with the Arab world. And certainly there's a big part of the Arab world that wants it today more than ever. And find a solution and work towards the possible peace. We should do that in partnership with our current enemies, but we should not relieve them from their responsibility to doing everything they can on their part to contribute to an effort of peace. So, I'll conclude, for now, by saying that of a tragedy. Israelis and Palestinians are too often like a fucked up marriage. There is so much potential there. We just need good counseling. Unfortunately, there isn't one right now around. But I'm sure and certain, and I know that there will be. And one last thing. This session is called Setting the Table for, what was it? Setting the table for peace?
Peace, I believe, yes. Yes. Yes, I believe
You know, when I was in 8th grade, they split the classroom in school, and the boys were sent to study electronics, whereas the girls were sent to study household management. Now, no, don't boo, don't boo. For civilizations, it has been girls and women who have specialized in setting tables. So, this is one other thing that will contribute a lot to not only setting the table for peace, but also getting one, when we have more women in the process.
All I can follow that with is to promise you that when Merav and myself normally sit down for a conversation, it does not consist of 2 10-minute speeches at each other, and then we leave and part ways. Unfortunately, that's what today's conversation between Merav. I invite you to come to a cafe in Tel Aviv to witness the other kind of conversation that we have. I'll say one short thing in response to what you said, Merav. At the risk. Now, I do want to say this, because Merav made an important point about imagine what you're going through now, carrying on for 15 years. And my comment on that is, do not let the abnormal become normal. And one of the things that I think happened in Israel is that we didn't know how to pull back the conversation, and people kept thinking, okay, we'll just move a little more here, a little more here, a little, and you never know when to stop. And that is a mistake, I believe, politically, strategically, that we have to pull ourselves back from. So endeth the conversation between Daniel and Merav.
Hi everybody, just a quick reminder, Mox News survives solely on your tips and contributions. It's easy to make a contribution or a tip or leave a tip at moxnews.com, or there are clickable links in the text body of this video. It should take the average person, most people, probably less than 2 minutes. Thanks very much for your time and your continued support. Stay cool, Wednesdays. This war is going to end. Till that day.